Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Kaplan's Investing in a Corporate CFA Learning Program. My name is Brian Stipe. I'm a Segment Sales Director for Advanced Designations here at Kaplan, and I'll be the host for our event. Today, we'll be discussing the changing employer-employee relationship and how investing in a structured program for CFA candidates can help your company and employees find shared success. This is just a glimpse of how Kaplan can help your learning and development needs, and is the second in Kaplan's Business and Financial Services webinar series for decision makers. A couple of housekeeping notes before I introduce our speakers. For questions, please use the question tab on the GoToWebinar platform, and we'll do our best to answer these in real time or at the end if time permits. A recording of the session will be sent to you in the next few days. Please pass along the content to anyone you work with who may benefit, and let us know if other similar webinars are of interest to you. We also have some polls for you to answer, so please keep your eyes out for those pop-ups on the platform as well. Thankfully, I have two colleagues here to help with the discussion, and their expertise will certainly add some flavor to the conversation. First is Philippa Sheridan, CFA. Philippa is a content specialist and CFA instructor who is joining us from the UK. Welcome, Philippa.
Hi.
And second is Brandon Bastide. Brandon is the Chief Partner Officer at Kaplan. Brandon, do you mind starting us off?
Yeah, happy to, Brian. And first of all, thank you for the great leadership you've provided across the CFA community. Philippa, to you as well. You guys asked me to talk at a little bit of a higher global level around what's happening with talent recruitment and development. And so, that's kind of my role to lead off here. I also serve as Kaplan's Global Head of Learn Work Innovation. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the future of learning and work. And one of my assumptions is that we're quickly moving towards a world where those two things are becoming one and the same. But I think as it relates to kind of where we are in talent recruitment and development, I would call it that we are now officially at what I've described as an all-access talent moment. And it's not just going to be a moment, it's going to be a lasting shift in terms of how we think about this. And I just want to talk about a few of those high-level points. Many of us, of course, have read articles and talked about the skills gap, right? The growing skills gap, the distance between where human beings are who are looking for jobs and the skills or other assets required to fill those jobs. And certainly there's a lot of evidence that we are facing a growing skills gap. You think about the advent of things like AI and other just fast-moving developments, and it's hard to keep up, let alone thinking about areas where we've got retirements and other things that are driving massive changes in our needs for talent. So at the same time that we have this growing skills gap, we also, especially in the United States, have a shrinking human pie. And we've been sitting at historically low rates of unemployment now for a persistent period of time, with the exception of the black swan event, of course, of a pandemic where unemployment spiked really high, came back down pretty quickly. It was really only about an 18-month period where unemployment was dramatically affected by the pandemic. But if you take that black swan event out, we've been at historically low rates of unemployment for years. And I would argue that we are going to be there for at least 2 more decades to come. Why do I say that? Birth rates in the US are at an all-time low. We don't have any net new immigration rates at an all-time low. And we're also faced with some major demographic shifts where over the next 5 years, for example, we are going to see a 15% decrease in the number of 18-year-olds coming of age, right? This is just a simple population age demographic, fewer babies born 18 years ago. So if you're looking about fresh talent, either coming into college or out of college, we're going to have about a 15% drop off in those numbers in the United States over the next 5 years. At the same time that we're expecting to lose 70 million baby boomers to retirement. The simple point here is that we're out of people. And when employers are out of people and still trying to grow, it creates what I described as this all-access talent moment. So I think, Brian, one of the things that Kaplan is spending a lot of time working on in partnership with the organizations we work with is how to solve for this massive set of dynamics that I just described. And what it means fundamentally is that we need to look at every single potential candidate that's out there, including pursuing potential candidates who might not be thinking about roles within our organizations or within our field, right? And what it does is it opens up the door in many ways to candidates that, for example, haven't gone to college or haven't completed college or are just less comfortable and have been less prepared with certain learning environments. So it challenges us to do so many different things. And I think it puts a lot of onus on organizations to be really creative and to get really aggressive in how we think about learning as a critical strategy to talent recruitment and retainment. And what I'll just say is a couple of quick points to kind of drive this particular point home is that what employees are looking for, what prospective hires are looking for now more than at any time in history, is they want to join an organization and be in a role where they can constantly learn and grow and develop. It's come to the very top of the list of desirable attributes of what potential employees are looking for in an employer. So there's a demand side of this kind of thirst for learning and growth and development that's part of it. And I'll just share a couple interesting stats. There was a study I was involved with when I was in my previous role at Gallup, and we asked people to rate their jobs on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best imaginable job. It turns out that for those of us who give our jobs a 10, it's a pretty rare percentage, only about 11, 12% of Americans give their job a 10. But for those who do, the top driver of that 10 rating is that they say they feel like they learn something new each day in their job. So, one of the shortcuts to having a great job is making sure you're in a role where you're constantly learning something new as it relates to that particular role. And then there's been an ongoing study by IBM that's been looking at hiring managers and their judgment about how much time they think employees need to spend upskilling or reskilling to remain relevant in their role. And this study still blows me away. About half a decade ago, they said it was about 3.4 days a year that people had to engage in some form of upskilling or reskilling. That is now 34 days a year, which has gone up 10x in just the last half decade. We've got our work cut out for us. So I'll turn it back to you guys to tell us about how we're solving for that within the CFA community.
Yeah, well, Brandon, we just got the poll results in, and you'll be happy to know that everyone said yes, they agree. They have to be more creative when it comes to the hiring and retaining the talent in the future. So positive news. All right. So Philippa, in regards to just changing, and the changing landscape, do you want to talk a little bit? Your expertise is on the CFA side. Obviously, you have years of experience as an instructor, teaching students, helping candidates get through the program. What have you seen recently that this audience would be interested in, just from a CFA perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So some of you might already be familiar with CFA exams. So sorry if anything I say you think, oh, I already know that. There's been a lot of changes to the CFA exams over the last couple of years. A lot of the kind of practicality side as well as the technical syllabus that's being examined. So it's changed to an online exam. It used to be pencil and paper. When I did it, it was pencil and paper. And this was always in the running. It got expedited a little bit because of the COVID pandemic, but since 2021, they've been online exams, and that's changed kind of the format and how candidates approach the exam a little bit as well. Because they are now online, that's enabled CFA to offer more exam sittings. So it used to be, depending on which level you were looking at, either 1 or 2 sittings a year. Now it's 2, 3, or 4. So level 1 has got 4 different sittings a year, so essentially every quarter. So there's a lot more opportunity for candidates to sit the exam, but also potentially defer it. And of course, we want to support candidates to continue through their studies, but we know how tempting it can be if they think, oh, well, I can just actually defer it for a couple of months rather than, well, a few years ago, if you were doing level 3, you'd have had to defer it for a whole year, for example. They've also changed the dates of the exams. So until it became online, when it was a paper-based exam, it was one day, and you sat it on that one day, and it was a Saturday, and there you go, that was the day you sat the exam. Whereas now there's an exam window. Because it's online, the exams are structured from a pool of questions rather than every single candidate globally sits exactly the same exam. And so there's an exam window. It's normally about 6 days. So for example, in November, I think it's the 11th to the 17th of November, and candidates can sit at any point in that time. And that's definitely changed candidates' approach a little bit to how they want to study and how they want to kind of manage their timetable. So on our learning management system, the candidates, they can do any of the tasks, any of the learning whenever they want. There's no restrictions to that, but we provide a kind of guideline of what you should be doing to make sure you're going to be ready for your exam date. And you might think, oh, well, if it's a week window, that doesn't actually make much of a difference, but there's so much content for these exams that deciding when you're going to do your final mock exam, when you need to have enough time left over to kind of review, etc., is really important. So candidates can tailor the system to their exact exam date, and kind of the required or suggested deadlines for certain tasks kind of get updated, which feedback from candidates, they found that really, really useful. There was a poll there about the pass rates, and I can see, so what have we got? 45% of you, so almost half of you, got the right answer, 39%. That was the pass rate for the May 2023 Level 1 exam. Yes, so about half of you knew that. If you were surprised by that, that's very average. So I didn't pick out May 2023 because it was a rogue sitting. Actually, if you look over about the last decade, the average for level 1 is about 40%. Goes up slightly with the later levels, but only up to kind of 45 and 50% for level 2 and 3. They are hard exams. Anecdotally, I don't know where this research comes from, but if you Google hardest exams in the world, you get a whole variety of websites that come up. CFA is always in the top 10. Varies where it is. I don't know the research behind it, but it is a difficult exam. And a 39% pass rate for level 1, kind of the step in the door, is reflective of what generally happens. There was a particularly low in 2021. There was a 22% pass rate. The CFA haven't really said why that was. Combination of COVID, introduction of online exams, they haven't really said why it was, but around 40% is the average pass rate. They are difficult exams, and not only is the content difficult, but how to approach the exam technique required, the time management, they're time pressured exams as well. And what we found since the exams have gone online and the COVID pandemic, there's obviously been much more of a shift. A lot of people are working from home more, etc. It depends, of course, what job they're in. But there's been much more of a shift to wanting to study online, either live classes or on demand, so the resources there when the candidates want them. Of course, back in the day, we were solely face-to-face tuition, and gradually we introduced the online offering, which is now our main offering. Depending on where you are globally, there are some classes running kind of face-to-face. And so we've really had to develop our system to make sure that it's giving candidates what they want. If you're wondering about the screen behind me, I've been recording videos for candidates today to help them with particularly tricky areas for their level 1 exam. And we've introduced a couple of other things. So for example, we've got a community forum. So this is only available, you can find various forums online that are open to anyone, but this is only available for candidates who have signed up to our courses. And candidates can post technical questions on there, so we monitor them, myself and my colleagues, every day. We monitor them, we go in, we answer the technical questions. They might have a question generally about the syllabus or about a particular mock question that they've seen. But also what I found candidates really liking as well is the kind of peer-to-peer support. So candidates can open a thread. Some of them are technical, they're the ones that I will answer, but some are often asking, is there a WhatsApp group I can join? And I've seen big WhatsApp groups for particular cohorts. I've seen some meetups be organised in some of the larger cities where people have found other candidates they didn't know previously, but they're all kind of studying together now. And I think candidates have really, really found that a useful tool. They want that balance of the online, on demand, I want to study when it suits me with my 2023 home work life balance, etc. But also I want that kind of person support as well. They have the technical support and then also kind of peer-to-peer support there as well. So that's just a few kind of changes that have happened over the last few years. It's a big time of change. Moving forwards, the kind of practicalities of the CFA exam seem to be calming down in terms of the changes, but they're going through big syllabus shifts at the moment as well. So if anyone's been studying previously and not sat the exam, what they're finding is going into 2024 and 2025, we're starting to get information about those kind of big syllabus changes as well, that obviously we are supporting candidates through.
That
And
is
I'll
great.
hand
That's
back
very
to
helpful.
one
Yes,
of you
thank
now.
you,
So
Philippa.
clearly, Philippa, I mean, the almost endless list of changes and tweaks and adjustments that have been made to support, what I call the modern learner and the modern context of learning, time, you just got all these different things you're trying to balance, taking advantage of community, tutoring, all kinds of different support systems. I mean, you've certainly outlined that. And I think what we've come to understand too is, in addition to adjusting all of those really important nuances for the individual learner, there are organizational embraces that have also needed to be in place for ultimate success, right? So how does an organization get behind this learning? And we've seen examples all across the board in our work, as you might imagine, but the institutions that are having the most success, the companies that are having the most success, have built a real infrastructure around how they're supporting people pursuing this type of designation. As you mentioned, it's one of the hardest in the world to achieve, and thinking about carving out time during the workday that's purposed for the training or studying, thinking about paid time off to pursue it, thinking about how you build a network of mentorship within the organization. All of these things are going to be critical for driving success. And so, Brian, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit more about how Kaplan is supporting that, what that looks like in a best practice scenario at an organizational level.
Yep, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, so bottom line, as we've heard, this is a time-consuming exam with low pass rates. Candidates have expressed frustration with the lack of support, empathy, tangible benefits provided by their employers. And as Brandon just mentioned earlier, potential employees are now expecting more from their employers. So frankly, it's a lot. It's a lot to digest, and we understand that. So basically, what we're trying to do here is, how can you properly support your employees as they're going through the CFA program? And so in the simplest of terms, and this list could be 25 items, but I wanted to boil it down to just three, a three-step process to help support your candidates. Number one is communicate early and often. So it takes about 6 to 8 months of study time to properly prepare before the exam date. So employees need to decide if now is the right time to enroll. What does their work or personal calendars look like over the next half year before they commit to such a large endeavor? Your role as a training manager is to help communicate when registration opens, when Kaplan is having a top tips webinar, when the early registration deadlines are, and what the corporate reimbursement or personal training budget is for each of these employees. The most impactful communication method I've seen is when companies hold an in-person or virtual lunch session with interested employees and their department managers that features a Kaplan instructor, such as Philippa, someone from HR, L&D, and then a small panel of employees who have either taken or are taking the exam currently. And then this panel can share their stories, experiences, and provide guidance that's the most valuable to potential candidates. So number two is support, as Brandon mentioned. The most successful firms we work with all provide ample help and guidance to their CFA candidates, and this can come in many forms. A few examples include helping to cover exam-related fees and/or reimbursement for study materials, allowing time off, and even lightening of the workload before the exam dates. But the single best technique I have seen is setting up a mentor program with senior leaders who have gone through the exam. They can provide emotional and tactical support while also engaging younger employees, and at the same time, reinvigorating senior members at your firm. Again, the CFA exam process is grueling, but by providing support, you're showing that employees are not on their own and that you value and prioritize their learning and development needs. And then finally, the third item, track results. You'd be surprised how many companies we talk to who are unable to provide their candidate pass rates. Now, part of that is to blame by CFA Institute. They're very protective of this information, candidate privacy, so on. But a simple yes/no requirement for all of your candidates will ensure proper tracking and then a measurement of your return on this investment. And depending on the number of employees taking the exams, a debrief would be beneficial. What was their result? What helped, hindered, or allowed them to master a certain topic area? What resources by Kaplan or your company were the most helpful? And probably the most important, what advice would they give to future candidates as they start their studies? So again, to sum up, Three-step process. Communication is so important. There's a ton of information. We could have 5 other webinars just on the changes to the CFA curriculum, but we don't want to put everyone to sleep. So communicating some of those changes, Kaplan Schweizer has a ton of articles, blog posts, videos that explain these changes in small, digestible amounts that make sense for the individual candidate. So communication is key. Support is number 2. And then finally is tracking results so you can get a better understanding of your return on investment. So I know that was a lot of information and I appreciate everyone sticking with us. Luckily, we have a fully trained and experienced sales and customer engagement team here at Kaplan, and they're happy to continue this conversation and help tailor a program that will meet your specific needs. Okay, so moving on, and I know we are running short of time, but we do have a few questions for the audience. This first one is for Brandon. Okay. Recently, I've heard about Kaplan and universities partnering to provide students with unlimited access to exam course prep materials. Can you elaborate, and does Kaplan offer a similar corporate option to help with our L&D budget?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, thanks for the question. You know, we've been thrilled, you know, for an organization that's been at test prep for 85 years now and started with the SAT, right, in Stanley Kaplan's parents' basement in Brooklyn, New York. A lot of people know Kaplan for, you know, pre-college exams like SAT, ACT. Long story short, we provide exam prep across all kinds of graduate school, professional licensure, obviously including CFA. But one of the things we've been doing with universities, we kind of changed the model where we're now offering partnerships with universities where they can extend free Kaplan test prep to students for all graduate and professional licensure exams at no cost. So whether it's the GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT, the MCAT, or if they're in nursing school, law school, or medical school, certainly the examples of things like NCLEX, BAR, or USMLE. And what's been powerful about that is that, of course, you know, there's only a certain percentage of students who take advantage of commercially available world-class exam prep like Kaplan offers. For those who can't afford it, they just don't do it. And the difference in their scores and performance suffers as a result. So in this new institutional model that we call All Access, students are provided unlimited free access to test prep. And it's doing exactly what we had hoped to do, which was that the majority of students taking advantage of it are underrepresented minority students and or first generation students. And one of the things that we're excited to do is more of this work supporting companies. So it's not exactly the same kind of menu, but imagine this, Brian. Obviously, we can provide test prep and support for a number of different exams across many different industries. But importantly, we're starting to realize that for employees, one of the most powerful benefits is how the organization supports an entire family. And so when you think about it, we moved the unit of analysis or focus from an individual employee to their family, however that family might be defined, and starting to offer some of these benefits to dependents, then it starts to really unlock the entire menu of what Kaplan can provide. So imagine, you know, being able to have your children take an SAT or ACT prep or AP prep with Kaplan, or you might have one who's headed to graduate school, wants to get into a top business school, and they can take some of our world-class prep with our MPrep program. And so anyway, the long story short there is that we are absolutely eager to extend those same types of programs and offerings to companies, whether it's for the employees themselves or something that is offered to employee dependents as well.
That's great. All right, we have one in for Philippa. Okay. What advice would you give our non-finance major employees who are now interested in the CFA program, but are starting at a little bit of a disadvantage compared to their colleagues who have a background in finance?
Time. So the CFA exam doesn't require any official kind of finance background, either from an educational perspective or from a work perspective. But it does have, so when they release the syllabus, they have a certain amount that they put into the prerequisite program, which essentially means that it's content that you are not explicitly going to be tested on, but you need to be comfortable with it to kind of understand the main testable syllabus. So, you know, just like if you're learning a foreign language, it might not be testable what the alphabet is in that language, but if you don't know it, you're going to struggle with the rest. And what we kind of, for candidates who have a finance background, that prerequisite material, which is quite substantial, for those with a background, we say, you know, dip in and out of it. If you come across something that you are struggling with, go and have a look at the prerequisites, make sure that you do know that already, and then come back. But if you are coming from a non-finance background, it's completely possible. I came from a non-finance background. Things work slightly differently in the UK to the US, but my bachelor's degree was in music. So I didn't have a finance background. And I would say the kind of prerequisite material that needs to be built in to allow enough time to fully digest that and understand what you should already know before you get started. And that goes for level 1 more than the later levels. The later levels feed off of what you learn in level 1, but of course that's kind of the entry point, the starting point. So it is completely possible, but it's just enabling the candidates to have that time to get to grips rather than diving straight in, assuming they're going to be at a level kind of playing field.
Perfect. We have one more for you, if you're willing, Philippa. Are university students eligible to sit for the exam? And if so, where can firms kind of find these individuals that might be like 1 or 2 steps ahead before they even start their official career?
Yeah, so my understanding is for the CFA, you either have to have a bachelor's degree or an equivalent of a bachelor's degree, or be within, I think it's just under 2 years of completing it. So essentially, if you are already studying for your bachelor's degree, you can get started on the program. Of course, if they are already started on the CFA program, they might already be thinking about what their next career move is going to be, etc. Now, these universities, colleges often have careers fairs and kind of those recruitment events where firms can go and they can look and they can talk to candidates about this. So yes, candidates can already get started on the program, and I know some firms kind of do it as a bit of a partnership in that they will recruit candidates for when they finish their degree, assuming that they meet the criteria, and help support them through the CFA at the same time.
Great. All right, we got one last question here, and this one I'll take. What are the next steps if I need more information or I'm not sure if I have an account manager? Okay, I'll be honest, I planted that slide because that leads me to our next, hold on one second. Okay, next steps, because we're almost at time here. So the easiest way is to scan this QR code that's listed on the screen right now. That will lead you to a contact us form, and then someone will follow up with you with more information. If you do have an account manager, they will be following up afterwards. Again, we're going to send a recording afterwards as well, so you can feel free to share that with colleagues or anyone else. If all else fails, our website, kaplan.com, Kaplan Schweizer, lots of information there, and that'll help you through the process. Okay, and one final note before I have to close things out. The save the date on November 2nd, we're holding the 3rd of these webinar series. It's on Secure Act 2.0, the impacts and opportunities for advisor teams. So that is for training managers. More information will follow with that. All right, one second here. Okay, so that concludes today's event. Special thank you to our speakers, Philippa Sheridan and Brandon Bustede, and of course to all of our attendees. We all, just mentioned that. So on behalf of Kaplan, we appreciate you attending and we look forward to working with you in the future. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.